Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of the rise of the Black Arms and the Shadow War, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. Long before the Black Arms arrived on Earth, they were already a story etched across countless stars. Their origins were not the kind sung about in heroic tales, nor celebrated in the myths of worlds. They were not a people who built golden cities or civilizations devoted to peace. Theirs was a life of silence, shadows, and hunger. The Black Arms thrived not by creating, but by consuming, moving from world to world, stripping away everything until nothing remained but ruins adrift in the void. Across galaxies, the first whispers of their presence always came the same way. A distant shadow crossing in front of a star, a sudden silence in a thriving sector of space, a missing colony reduced to echoes and ash. Other civilizations looked up to the night sky and saw comfort in the light of distant sun. The Black Arms, however, saw only opportunity. They saw weakness, and in their hunger, they learned patience, waiting centuries if needed before striking. At the heart of this ancient race stood their ruler, Black Doom. To many, he was no mere leader, but something closer to a force of nature. A being whose presence demanded silence, whose very gaze felt like a weight pressing against the soul. Black Doom did not conquer through speeches or inspiration. He conquered with fear, with promises whispered like poison in the dark, and with the certainty that his people existed for one purpose only, to survive by dominating all others. The Black Arms were unlike any species humanity had ever imagined. Their bodies were both alien and familiar, organic yet monstrous, their forms shifting and bending like shadows given flesh. Some were winged, some spider-like, others serpentine, yet all carried the same aura of dread. They were not bound by one shape or single form. They were an army sculpted to fit any battlefield, any enemy, any world. But their true strength was not in their bodies alone. The Black Arms were bound by an instinctive hive mind, connected through Black Doom himself. His thoughts stretched across them like an invisible chain, his will flowing through every soldier, every drone, every weapon. This unity made them unstoppable. Where one fell, another took its place. Where armies tried to scatter them, they reformed like smoke gathering in a storm. For centuries, their path of destruction painted dark scars across galaxies. Some worlds whispered of them as demons. Others claimed they were curses born from the void. But no matter what name they were given, one truth remained constant. Once the Black Arms set their eyes upon a planet, that world's fate was sealed. And yet there was something different about Earth. Something that drew their attention in a way unlike the many planets before. Perhaps it was the richness of its life, the diversity of its creatures, the promise of its resources. Or perhaps it was the unique potential of its people. Whatever the reason, Black Doom marked Earth long before the invasion began. He chose patience once more, watching from afar, waiting for the right moment to claim it. That patience took the form of a comet, an enormous celestial body that wandered silently through space. Hidden within its heart was the Black Arms' fortress, their nest, their throne. To most, it looked like nothing more than a drifting chunk of rock and ice. But in truth, it was a weapon, a vessel, and a home all in one. The comet would pass through solar systems like a shadow, carrying with it the seeds of destruction. It was known as the Black Comet, and its cycles through the galaxy were as inevitable as the rising of a sun. 50 years before their eventual return, the comet swept past Earth. Humanity watched the skies with awe as this massive, glowing body streaked across the heavens. They called it a wonder, a celestial event, a reminder of the vastness of the universe. But for the Black Arms, this was not a display, it was reconnaissance. Black Doom had come close enough to study the planet, to breathe in its atmosphere, to measure its defenses, and judge its worth. What humanity did not know was that Earth's story had already been intertwined with the Black Arms. Long before the comet's arrival, Black Doom's whispers had reached one of the most brilliant minds on Earth, Professor Gerald Robotnik. A man driven by both genius and grief, Gerald sought answers in places no other scientist dared to explore. His research into genetics, immortality, and the ultimate life form led him to seek knowledge beyond human boundaries. And in his desperation, he made a pact that would tie Earth's fate to the Black Arms forever. But those whispers, those first quiet promises, were not shouted from the skies. They came softly, like the faint sound of wind in a dream. To Gerald, they offered the possibility of miracles. To Black Doom, they were nothing more than the setting of a snare. As the comet drifted away from Earth, leaving only streaks of light in the night sky, humanity returned to their lives. Lovers who had stood together watching it faded back into their routines. Children who had wished on its trail grew up never knowing the truth. But in the silence of the stars, Black Doom's promise lingered. The Black Arms would return, and when they did, it would not be as a passing wonder in the sky. It would be as conquerors, bringing the war they had carried across countless worlds to the blue planet below. Earth slept, unaware that its future had already been written in the void. The Black Arms did not act without purpose. For every strike, every invasion, there was calculation. Black Doom himself was a strategist, his mind as sharp as any blade. To him, Earth was not simply another planet to devour. It was a resource, a stepping stone, and, perhaps most importantly, a breeding ground for something greater. The Black Arms were strong, yes, but even strength has limits. Across galaxies, they had faced resistance. Entire civilizations had fallen, but the cost of victory had grown higher over the centuries. Black Doom knew that his people would need more than raw force to endure the challenges to come. They would need evolution. They would need a weapon that could surpass anything encountered before. It was this belief that led him to Gerald Robotnik. Humanity, in its brief time among the stars, had not yet built fleets to rival other species. Their weapons were primitive compared to alien empires. Yet their minds, curious, ambitious, and willing to bend the natural order, made them valuable. They were capable of creating tools and life forms that reached beyond their limits. Gerald was the perfect example of this. A scientist not satisfied with answers, but one who clawed relentlessly toward greater truths. Gerald's grief over Maria had driven him to obsession. He wanted to cure disease, to grant humanity the gift of immortality, to forge a being that could protect life itself. His noble vision blurred with desperation, and it was in that weakness that Black Doom found his opening. Whispers filled the professor's dreams, promises of knowledge beyond human reach. To Gerald, it was inspiration. To the Black Arms, it was manipulation. The pact that followed was quiet, hidden in shadows. Black Doom did not arrive in blazing fire or thunder. He appeared as a presence, a voice that guided Gerald's experiments. From him came the genetic blueprints, fragments of alien essence, and knowledge of powers that humanity could never hope to master alone. With these gifts, Gerald created something extraordinary, Shadow the Hedgehog, a being designed to surpass human limitations. But Black Doom's price was never forgotten. Embedded within Shadow's very DNA was a connection to the Black Arms, a silent tether to the Hive. Shadow was both miracle and weapon, both savior and curse. To Gerald, he was the ultimate life form, a protector who could one day preserve humanity's future. To Black Doom, he was an investment, a pawn waiting to be claimed when the time was right. And so, while humanity gazed at the comet and celebrated its passing, the true story was hidden in laboratories deep within the Ark. Few knew of the alien influence seeping into their brightest creation. Fewer still understood that Earth had already welcomed the enemy inside. The comet drifted onward, pulling away from Earth, disappearing into the cold vastness of space. Decades passed. Humanity grew, fought wars, built cities, and reached new heights of technology. The memory of the comet faded into astronomy books and childhood stories. Generations came and went, and Earth began to believe it was safe. But the Black Arms never forget. Time to them was different. Measured not in decades, but in cycles, in the return of their comet, as it carved its endless path through the stars. While Earth slept, the Black Arms gathered strength. Their armies multiplied in the fortress, hidden within the comet's core. Their weapons grew sharper, their hunger more focused. They watched and waited. Across the galaxy, other worlds fell silent in the meantime. Civilizations whose names would never reach Earth were swallowed in fire and shadow. Some fought with all their might, only to be buried beneath endless waves of black-armed soldiers. Others surrendered quickly, hoping to be spared, only to discover that mercy was not part of the Black Arms' nature. With every victory, their power swelled. With every conquest, the comet carried more soldiers, more weapons, more despair. And all the while, Black Doom's gaze lingered on Earth. The blue planet spun quietly in its orbit, oblivious to the storm gathering just beyond sight. To Black Doom, it was not merely another conquest. Earth was special. Within its people lay something different, an adaptability, a spirit of defiance that intrigued him as much as it infuriated him. It was not a world to be ignored. It was the prize worth patience. In secret, he whispered still. To minds on Earth sensitive enough to hear, faint echoes of the Black Arms lingered like half-remembered dreams. Some called them visions, others dismissed them as madness. But the voices were there, warning, tempting, promising. The seeds of the coming war were already planted, hidden deep within humanity's own imagination. As the years slipped away, so too did the veil of safety. The Black Comet's return was inevitable, written into the very mathematics of the cosmos. Astronomers began to notice small irregularities in the stars. Telescopes caught glimpses of something vast, moving slowly but steadily closer. At first, it was dismissed as routine, a comet, nothing more. But the truth lay beneath that icy disguise. The Black Arms were coming. And this time, they would not pass by silently. They would descend. They would strike. And Earth, unprepared for the ancient hunger sweeping toward it, would soon learn the meaning of fear written in fire across its skies. The whispers had grown louder. The silence of the stars was beginning to break. The closer the Black Comet drew, the more its presence pressed against the fabric of Earth's reality. Scientists who stared too long into the sky described an unease they could not explain. There was a weight in the air, a tension. They felt in their bones. Animals grew restless in the nights, their cries cutting into the silence of cities and villages alike. Some cultures called these omens. Others simply ignored them, writing them off as superstition. but the signs were there. The comet was not simply drifting through space. It was alive. Inside its core, the black arms stirred like shadows beneath the surface of a pond. Their movements were slow, methodical, but relentless. Entire legions awoke from slumber, their claws scraping against stone-like walls, their voices echoing in the hive chambers that spiraled endlessly within the comet. They had been waiting, conserving their strength. Now their time was nearly at hand. For the Black Arms, Earth was more than food, more than territory. It was the stage for Black Doom's plan that had been centuries in the making. Gerald Robotnik's creation, Shadow, was the keystone. Black Doom's influence ran through Shadow's veins, a bond that could not be severed by time or distance. Shadow represented both promise and threat. Promise, because he was the weapon Black Doom had envisioned. A being with the potential to unlock power beyond anything the Hive had known. Threat, because Shadow also carried human spirit, an element of unpredictability that could either serve the Black Arms or stand against them. Black Doom's confidence was unshaken. He had always been patient, and patience had always rewarded him. He would call upon Shadow when the time was right. And when Shadow bent to his will, Earth's fate would be sealed. As the comet's glow returned to human skies, the world celebrated once again. News channels filled their broadcasts with images of the dazzling streak of lights. Children pointed out windows, their faces lit with wonder. Couples gathered on rooftops to make wishes, their voices carried by the night air. Humanity remembered the comet from decades before, but still they saw only beauty, not danger. Yet some, in quiet corners, felt something else. The glow was not comforting. It was oppressive. For the few who were sensitive, the whispers had grown louder, dreams filled with visions of fire. The sensation of eyes staring from above, a coldness that crept into their sleep. Though they could not name it, they felt the truth. This comet was no gift. It was a warning. Meanwhile, in the hidden records of Gerald Robotnik's research, fragments of his Pact lingered. Files buried deep within the Ark's archives told of genetic blueprints, of alien DNA, of a deal struck in shadows. Few ever discovered these files, and those who did were silenced or dismissed. But the legacy remained woven into Shadow's very being. He was the reminder that the Black Arms had already touched Earth, that the invasion was not a possibility, it was a certainty. Black Doom's gaze stretched across the stars. His presence could be felt in the silence between heartbeats, in the shadow that lingered a second too long at the corner of one's vision. He was patient, but he was also absolute. The Black Comet was not only his throne, but his weapon. When it finally descended, it would not strike like a single blade. It would tear through the sky like a storm, raining soldiers, fire, and fear upon every city it passed. And yet, for all his power, Black Doom did not underestimate his enemy. Humanity was fragile compared to the civilizations he had already crushed, but it had a stubbornness he recognized. It was that stubbornness that had created Shadow. It was that stubbornness that might resist even the hunger of the Black Arms. To counter this, Black Doom would not simply arrive as an invader. He would arrive as a conqueror already inside humanity's walls, claiming what had always been his, the life form born of his blood. The whispers continued. They threaded through dreams, through Gerald's legacy, through the silent approach of the comet itself. Whispers of surrender, whispers of destiny, whispers that promised that resistance was meaningless, that the shadow of the Black Arms would stretch across Earth just as it had stretched across countless other worlds. Still, Earth slept. Its armies prepared for conflicts of their own making, nations against nations, people against people. Its scientists studied the stars, but their calculations ended at the surface of the comet, unable to pierce the truth within. Its heroes lived their lives unaware of the storm approaching. Only Shadow himself, the ultimate creation, would one day stand between Earth and the alien tide. But even he, at this moment, did not yet know which side he belonged to. Time moved forward. The comet grew brighter, its trail streaking across the heavens like a wound cut into the night sky. Humanity prepared its telescopes, its cameras, its celebrations. Children rehearsed their wishes, imagining the comet as a divine messenger. But in the silence between the cheers, the black arms stirred. Their claws flexed, their wings unfolded. Their eyes glowed in chambers filled with mist and fire. The war had not yet begun, but its shadow had already fallen. And so, as the night deepened and the comet carved its path overhead, the first chapter of Earth's greatest trial drew quietly to a close. The whispers from the stars had spoken. They had warned of hunger, of conquest, of a darkness that did not create, but consume. When the Black Arms came, they would not ask permission. They would not offer compromise. They would not come with peace. They would come with the silence of shadows, with fire that devoured cities, with claws that tore down hope itself. The stars held their breath. The Earth turned, and the comet moved closer. The war had not yet begun, but it was already written. And somewhere, deep within the void, Black Doom waited, watching, patient, eternal. Chapter 2. The Creation of Shadow. In the cold silence of outer space, above the turning blue of Earth, the space colony Ark drifted. From a distance, it looked serene, a wheel-shaped fortress wrapped in the glow of the planet below. But inside its laboratories, brilliance and obsession thrived. Here worked Professor Gerald Robotnik, one of the greatest scientific minds humanity had ever produced. And here, in the quiet hum of machinery and the sterile glow of white light, the seeds of Earth's greatest protector and its greatest weapon were sown. Gerald was not a man driven. In the cold silence of outer space, above the turning blue of Earth, the space colony Ark drifted. From a distance, it looked serene, a wheel-shaped fortress wrapped in the glow of the planet below. But inside its laboratories, brilliance and obsession thrived. Here worked Professor Gerald Robotnik, one of the greatest scientific minds humanity had ever produced. And here, in the quiet hum of machinery and the sterile glow of white light, the seeds of Earth's greatest protector and its greatest weapon were sown. Gerald was not a man driven by ambition alone. He was driven by grief. His granddaughter, Maria Robotnik, suffered from a disease humanity could not cure. She was gentle, filled with compassion, her laughter soft as starlight. But she lived in a fragile body that betrayed her. Gerald, brilliant though he was, could not accept that. To him, Maria's illness was not a fate to be endured, but a challenge to be overcome. And so his research turned toward something extraordinary, the creation of life itself. He dreamed of building the ultimate life form, a being immune to sickness, immune to time, capable of protecting not only Maria, but humanity itself. He told himself it was for science, for the future, for a world where no child would suffer as Maria did. But behind those noble intentions was a grandfather's desperate heart, willing to sacrifice anything, willing to chase knowledge no matter how dangerous. It was in this desperation that Gerald first heard the whispers. At first, they were fleeting thoughts, ideas that seemed to appear fully formed in his mind, new equations, new concepts in genetics and energy control that went far beyond human understanding. He told himself it was inspiration, the spark of genius. But it was not. It was Black Doom. From across the stars, Black Doom reached out with his voice, subtle and steady. He offered knowledge beyond anything humanity had ever touched. The manipulation of chaos energy, the integration of alien DNA, the secrets of biological immortality. In exchange, he asked for a single promise, that Gerald would create his life form, not only for humanity, but for the Black Arms. A being who could one day serve as their key to Earth. Gerald did not see the snare. He heard only the possibility of saving Maria. He accepted the whispers, writing equations that no human mind had conceived, building designs that seemed to come from dreams. He worked day and night in the Ark's laboratories, his team following him, though they could never understand the true origin of his knowledge. From this unholy union of human science and alien design, Shadow the Hedgehog was born. The process was long, spanning years. Cells fused with alien essence. Structures of DNA rewritten with precision. The power of Chaos Emeralds studied and integrated into the very fabric of his being. Piece by piece, the being began to take shape. Not as a simple clone, not as a machine, but as something new. A creature of strength and resilience, yet carrying within him the spirit of both Earth and the Black Arms. When Shadow finally awoke, his eyes glowed with crimson light, and his first breath echoed through the laboratory like a quiet storm. To Gerald, it was triumph. To Maria, it was wonder. To Black Doom, it was possession. Maria was the first to reach him. Where others saw an experiment, she saw a soul. She spoke to him gently, her voice trembling with awe, calling him not subject, but friend. For Shadow, who had opened his eyes into a world of cold lights and sterile walls, Maria's smile was the first warmth he ever knew. It was in her presence that he discovered something beyond his programming. Beyond the alien blood running in his veins, he discovered purpose. She would guide him through the Ark, showing him the gardens, the stars through the viewing ports, the quiet corners where she would sit and dream aloud. She told him about Earth, about the oceans and forests, about the simple joy of running under open skies. She painted the world as something worth protecting, worth living for. Shadow listened, absorbing her every word, and something within him stirred. He was not just a creation. He was alive. But in the shadows, Black Doom's influence lingered. Shadow was not free. Built into his design was a connection, a link to the Black Arms Hive. Black Doom could sense him, whisper to him, reach into the edges of his mind. For now, he stayed quiet, watching, patient. He would let Shadow grow, let him learn, let him build bonds with the humans who thought they had created him. But in time, when the Black Arms returned, that connection would be his weapon. For Gerald, this duality remained hidden. He saw only his success, his miracle. He declared Shadow the ultimate life form, convinced that his creation would stand as the savior of humanity. But his team worried. They saw the unnatural strength in Shadow, the way chaos energy flared in his body, the way his crimson eyes seemed both alive and unyielding. Some whispered that he was too powerful, too dangerous, that perhaps they had built something they could not control. Maria never feared him. To her, Shadow was not a weapon, but a companion. She spoke to him about kindness, about love, about the beauty of life. And Shadow, listening, began to believe. He was more than a tool, more than an experiment. He was her protector. Still, the truth of his origin remained. Shadow's blood was not purely human. His DNA carried the essence of the Black Arms, the influence of Black Doom himself. In his veins flowed the whispers of a war yet to come. And as Shadow stood by Maria's side, gazing out at the earth below, He could not yet know that he was the center of a conflict stretching across the stars. A war that would decide not only his fate, but the fate of the planet he would one day protect. Life aboard the Ark moved with a kind of gentle rhythm. Scientists came and went through sterile corridors, their white coats brushing softly against glass doors. The hum of machines was constant, a low pulse that echoed through the colony like a heartbeat. For most of the crew, their work was routine: data, samples, endless calculations. But for Gerald, everything revolved around one figure: Shadow. The Hedgehog was more than a creation to him. He was the culmination of a lifetime of knowledge, a symbol of hope, and, though Gerald would never admit it aloud, perhaps the only chance Maria had left. When Gerald looked at Shadow, he saw not just a scientific marvel, but a future he could not otherwise reach. And so his attention became singular. His energy poured entirely into nurturing Shadow's growth. Shadow was not like other beings. He did not grow as a child would. His mind was sharp, his memory flawless, his body strong from the very beginning. He absorbed information with frightening speed, repeating patterns, mastering languages, and responding to commands with mechanical precision. But when Maria was near him, that precision softened. He listened more than he spoke. He lingered longer than he needed. There was something in her presence that drew out a quiet humanity in him, a part of himself even Gerald had not predicted. Maria loved to take Shadow to the observation decks. She would press her hands against the glass, looking down at Earth's vast oceans, its swirling clouds. Her voice would grow bright as she described things she longed to see: sunlight filtering through trees, the crash of waves on rocky shores, the scent of flowers carried by the wind. She painted Earth as if it were a dreamland, fragile but beautiful. And though Shadow had never touched that world, he began to long for it too. Still, Shadow was not a free being. His very existence was a web woven from conflicting intentions. Gerald saw him as salvation. Maria saw him as a friend. The scientists around him saw danger, and far beyond, Black Doom saw him as property. The whispers did not stop. In the quiet of sleep, Shadow sometimes heard them, words without language, impressions of command, faint urges he did not understand. They flickered like shadows across his mind, fleeting but undeniable. He told no one, not even Maria. As months passed, Gerald's ambitions grew bolder. The more he studied Shadow, the more he pushed the boundaries of science. Chaos energy, once considered unstable and uncontrollable, now pulsed steadily within the Hedgehog's body. Gerald had managed to bind it, to focus it, to make it an extension of Shadow's will. But with every success came greater risk. Chaos was not tame. It was not gentle. The energy radiated in bursts, sometimes cracking glass instruments, sometimes drawing faint arcs of lightning across the lab's floors. Shadow could feel it within himself, a storm he struggled to control. Maria noticed, too. She would place her hand on his arm when his eyes burned too bright, her voice soft as she reminded him to breathe, to focus, to calm the chaos within. And somehow her presence always stilled the storm. Shadow would look at her and feel the noise recede, the power settle. She was his anchor. Yet beneath the surface, the project was changing. The military branch that funded Gerald's work began to grow impatient. They had supported the Ark not out of compassion for Maria, but because they saw potential in Gerald's research. Shadow was not just a life form to them. He was a weapon. A soldier immune to disease, capable of wielding chaos energy, designed to survive anything. Rumors began to spread among the crew that the government would one day demand Shadow be tested in combat. Gerald resisted these whispers, insisting Shadow's purpose was to protect life, not destroy it. But his words were met with silence and suspicion. And still, Black Doom waited. From within the depths of the comet, his awareness brushed against Shadow's mind, watching as the hedgehog grew. He saw Maria's influence shaping him, saw Gerald's dreams taking root. But he was not concerned. Shadow's blood carried the truth of his origin. Sooner or later, the tether would tighten, and the hedgehog would answer the call of the Black Arms. In moments when Gerald stood alone late at night in the labs, the whispers came to him as well. They urged him onward, reminded him of the Pact, reminded him that Shadow was not entirely his to claim. Gerald did not speak of these whispers. He drowned them in his work, convincing himself that his creation was his alone, that no alien force could control the miracle he had built with his own hands. Maria remained blissfully unaware of these tensions. To her, Shadow was not a pawn, not a weapon, not even a scientific miracle. He was her closest companion. In her eyes, he was gentle, though his power sometimes frightened others. She would walk with him through the Ark's gardens, her frail body supported by his steady presence. And as she spoke of dreams, Shadow found himself dreaming too. For the first time, he imagined a life not bound by labs, by orders, by whispers. A life beneath the open skies Maria loved to describe. But in the stars beyond, the comet continued its silent path. The Black Arms stirred in their fortress, their eyes burning with hunger, their master's voice steady and patient. Earth believed itself safe. The Ark believed itself isolated. Gerald believed himself victorious. Only Shadow, standing at the center of it all, carried the truth within his blood. The war had not yet begun, but the pieces were already in place. The days aboard the Ark began to blur together. To Maria, each one felt like a gift. Time spent with her grandfather, time spent with Shadow, time stolen from an illness that should have taken her long ago. But to Gerald, each day felt like a race against inevitability. He worked feverishly in his laboratories, surrounded by equations and machines that few could comprehend. The deeper he went into the mysteries of chaos energy, the further he strayed from what humanity would call reason. Shadow remained his masterpiece. Every test, every scan, every trial confirmed what Gerald already knew. Shadow was beyond perfect. His healing abilities surpassed all expectations. His physical endurance had no equal. And most remarkable of all, the chaos energy that flared within him was not only stable, but could be controlled. Gerald had created something that defied the limitations of biology and time itself. Yet the very perfection that gave Gerald pride filled the hearts of others with dread. The whispers among the Ark's staff grew louder. Some wondered aloud if humanity had gone too far. Others feared that Shadow was not a miracle, but a curse, a being whose power could one day turn against them. The military representatives who visited the Ark never looked at Shadow with wonder, only calculation. To them, he was a weapon they would one day claim. Gerald tried to shield Maria from these tensions, but she was not blind. She saw the way soldiers eyed Shadow, the way scientists lowered their voices when she approached. She saw the strain in her grandfather's eyes, the lines carved deep into his face from sleepless nights. And she understood in her quiet way that Shadow was more than just her companion. He was at the center of something vast and dangerous. But she never treated him as anything but a friend. To Maria, Shadow was not an experiment, not an ultimate life form, but simply Shadow. He was the one who listened when she spoke of her dreams, the one who steadied her when her illness weakened her, the one who made her laugh even when she felt too fragile to smile. Her bond with him was not forged in labs or commands, but in moments of quiet humanity. Sometimes, when she felt strong enough, Maria would take Shadow to the Ark's gardens. There, beneath simulated sunlight, she would close her eyes and pretend she was walking on Earth. She would ask Shadow to describe what he imagined forests would sound like, how rivers might flow, how wind might feel against his quills. Shadow, though inexperienced, would try. He would listen to the soft hum of the Ark's systems and tell her it might be like cicadas in the summer. He would close his eyes and imagine the ocean's rhythm, comparing it to the pulse of the Ark's engines. And Maria, listening, would laugh softly and say that one day he would see the real thing. And but there was a weight within Shadow he could not shake. He often stood at the observation deck, staring down at Earth, his reflection staring back from the glass. Maria's descriptions filled his mind, yet in his chest he carried something darker, whispers he could not explain, commands he did not understand. They were not Gerald's voice, nor Maria's. They were deeper, older, resonant, like thunder rolling through the void. They told him he was more than what Maria believed. They told him he belonged not to Earth, but to something far beyond it. He never shared these whispers, not with Maria, not with Gerald. To speak them aloud would be to admit they were real. Instead, he buried them, pushing them into the deepest corners of his mind. But they did not vanish. They lingered like shadows behind his thoughts, waiting for the right moment to surface. Meanwhile, Gerald pressed further into his research. Chaos control, a phenomenon once thought impossible, became his obsession. With Shadow as his vessel, he discovered the ability to bend space and time itself. Small demonstrations in the lab left his colleagues speechless. Objects moved across rooms in flashes of light. Moments slowed to a crawl before snapping back into place. Gerald believed this was the key not only to immortality, but to humanity's survival. With chaos control, Shadow could protect the Earth from any threat, preserve life against any disaster. But Gerald's brilliance blinded him to the cost. The whispers from Black Doom grew stronger as chaos energy surged through Shadow's body. Black Doom had not given his knowledge freely. Every equation Gerald had written, every success he had claimed, carried the fingerprint of the Black Arms. Chaos control was not a gift of humanity. It was a weapon of the Black Arms, passed through Shadow as part of their pact. And though Gerald refused to admit it, some part of him knew. On sleepless nights, when the lab lights flickered and the hum of machines seemed to fade into silence, he would hear the voice. Black Doom's words slid through his thoughts like cold smoke. The life form is ours. You built him, but his blood is mine. When the comet returns, he will answer the call. Gerald tried to fight it. He told himself Shadow belonged to him, to Maria, to humanity. He buried himself in work, believing that if he could just make Shadow strong enough, good enough, then no one, alien or human, could ever claim him. But denial was not enough. The Pact had been written into Shadow's very existence, and no amount of human will could erase it. Still, Shadow's bond with Maria deepened. She gave him what no equation, no alien whisper could provide: hope. She spoke to him of kindness, of compassion, of choosing to protect life because it was beautiful, not because it was logical. She gave him the strength to resist the darker parts of himself, to believe that he was more than just a creation or a weapon. But Maria's health continued to decline. Each week her body grew weaker, her walks through the gardens shorter. Shadow began to notice the way she leaned on him more, the way her laughter carried a faint edge of exhaustion. He understood, in his own quiet way, that her time was limited. And though he could not feel sickness, though he was immune to the frailties of humanity, Her suffering pierced him deeper than any wound could. Shadow's purpose solidified in those moments. He would protect her. He would protect the world she dreamed of. He would make sure her vision of Earth, with its oceans and skies and forests, would remain safe. This was not Gerald's command. It was not Black Doom's whisper. It was his own choice, his own will. And so Shadow, the being born from alien DNA and human desperation, began to walk a path neither Gerald nor Black Doom had intended. A path shaped not by science or whispers, but by a fragile girl who believed the world was worth saving. But fate was cruel. The Black Comet was drawing near again, its path inevitable. The whispers in Shadow's blood grew louder, more insistent. Black Doom was patient, but his patience was nearing its end. Maria's illness was worsening, and the military's interest in Shadow was deepening. And Gerald, caught between his dream of salvation and the shadow of his pact, was unraveling. The stage was set. The life form had been created. The bond had been forged. And in the quiet halls of the Ark, beneath the soft glow of the earth far below, the first threads of tragedy began to weave themselves into the story. Shadow had been created to save humanity. But whether he would save it or destroy it remained a question only time could answer. Chapter 3. The Eclipse Cannon and the Hidden Pact, Part 1. The Ark was a shining beacon of humanity's ambition. From orbit, its golden solar panels stretched like wings, glittering in the sunlight as it circled the Earth. Inside, however, a different light burned, one born not of hope, but of obsession. Gerald Robotnik stood alone in his private laboratory, staring at the blueprint projected before him. The design was grand, monstrous in scale, a weapon that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The Eclipse Cannon. Its frame would extend through the core of the Ark itself, fusing the research station with a barrel of destruction so immense, the Ark was a shining beacon of humanity's ambition. From orbit, its golden solar panels stretched like wings, glittering in the sunlight as it circled the Earth. Inside, however, a different light burned, one born not of hope, but of obsession. Gerald Robotnik stood alone in his private laboratory, staring at the blueprint projected before him. The design was grand, monstrous in scale, a weapon that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The Eclipse Cannon. Its frame would extend through the core of the Ark itself, fusing the research station with a barrel of destruction so immense it could pierce even the heavens. To the military, it was a promise, a deterrent that could silence enemies before war even began. To Gerald, it was a veil. Behind its official purpose lay his true, desperate intention. The cannon was not only a weapon of war, it was a device that could harness chaos energy on an unimaginable scale. With it, he believed he could unlock the final key to eternal life, the one force capable of saving Maria. Yet there was another layer, one Gerald never revealed to his colleagues, a silent clause buried in the architecture of his design. A contingency whispered to him in the long, sleepless nights when Black Doom's voice crept into his mind. The Eclipse Cannon will be ours, the alien murmured in his thoughts. Build it, human, and when the comet returns, its power shall awaken the destiny you promised. Gerald clenched his fist, shaking off the memory, but he could not escape it. He knew that the knowledge which had made the cannon possible did not belong to him alone. Equations had come too easily. Concepts once thought impossible had flowed from his hand as if dictated by another. In the still silence of the lab, he could admit it. The Black Arms' influence had guided him here. Shadow watched him often from the corners of the lab. The ultimate life form had no need of sleep, no need of rest. He observed, He listened. He studied the man who called himself his creator, who spoke of noble goals but hid shadows behind his eyes. "Why build such a weapon?" Shadow asked one evening. His voice calm, almost detached, but his eyes sharp. Gerald turned from the hologram, forcing a weary smile. "Because sometimes, Shadow, peace can only be achieved through strength. Humanity must have the power to defend itself." Shadow tilted his head slightly. "And if that strength is turned against humanity?" Gerald faltered just for a moment. It was the same question that haunted him every time the military inspected the Ark. But he recovered quickly, patting Shadow's shoulder as though that would smooth the doubt away. "That's why you're here, my boy. To ensure this power is never misused." Shadow said nothing more, but as Gerald walked away, his crimson eyes lingered on the schematics. There was something in the cannon's design that unsettled him. Something familiar. Maria was the only one who could bring light back into these heavy halls. She had heard whispers of the project from others, scientists who spoke of its power with awe or dread. But she chose not to ask her grandfather about it. Instead, she asked Shadow. They sat together in the garden, the stars above replaced by the Ark's glowing dome. Maria rested against him, her breath shallow but steady. "They say the Eclipse Cannon could destroy anything," she murmured. "That it could wipe out entire cities in an instant." Shadow hesitated, then nodded. "It has that potential." Maria looked up at him, her eyes soft but questioning. "And do you believe that's right? That such a thing should exist?" Shadow paused. He thought of the whispers he sometimes heard when he closed his eyes. Whispers of conquest, of destruction, of fire falling from the skies. He thought of his creator's tired smile, the way Gerald's hands trembled when he believed no one was watching. Finally, he shook his head. "I believe the world should be protected, not destroyed." Maria smiled faintly, her hand brushing against his. "Then promise me something, Shadow. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll use your power to protect, not to harm." Her voice carried no command, only hope. Shadow bowed his head, his heart tightening in a way he did not fully understand. "I promise." But deep within him, the black arm stirred. The promise of protection clashed with the ancient command written into his very blood. And far across the void, on a comet silently making its way toward Earth, Black Doom smiled. The Eclipse Cannon was not merely humanity's weapon. It was the beacon of a pact long hidden, a bond forged in desperation, now coming due. And Shadow, though he did not yet realize it, stood at the center of it all. The construction of the Eclipse Cannon turned the Ark into a hive of activity. Engineers worked tirelessly. Machinery roared through the station's silent halls, and vast shipments of metal and components arrived from Earth. The cannon's skeletal frame slowly rose, cutting through the Ark like the spine of some ancient beast, stretching outward into the void. From a distance, the Earth's nations watched in silence. To the public, it was said to be a defense project, a promise of safety in an uncertain future. To those in power, it was a bargaining chip, a weapon of fear and deterrence. And though Gerald had spoken of peace in his proposals, he knew the truth. Humanity had always been tempted by the allure of dominance, and the cannon gave them the means to grasp it. The military presence on the Ark grew heavier with each passing month. Uniformed officers oversaw the progress, walking the halls with sharp eyes and colder hearts. They regarded Shadow not as a being, but as property, an asset designed to complement the cannon. To them, he was the key to unleashing its full potential. His unique bond with chaos energy unlocking levels of destruction beyond their imagination. One officer in particular made his disdain clear. Commander Branson, a man hardened by decades of conflict, often spoke with Gerald in tones just shy of accusation. "You've built a masterpiece," Branson said during one inspection, his gaze fixed on the incomplete cannon. "But it's wasted as a symbol. With Shadow and this weapon combined, we could bring the entire planet under one banner. Imagine the order. Imagine the control." Gerald's jaw tightened. He masked his anger with calm words, though his voice trembled. "You misunderstand. This is not about domination. It's about survival. About ensuring no tragedy can strike humanity unprepared again." Branson smirked, his eyes narrowing. Survival, domination. Sometimes they're the same thing. Shadow, standing silently nearby, felt the tension ripple between them. He said nothing, but his gaze burned into Branson, crimson eyes glowing faintly under the sterile lights. The commander met his stare for only a moment before turning away. Later, when the officer had gone, Gerald leaned heavily against the console, his shoulders sagging. Shadow approached. "They don't see you as a man of science," Shadow said, his voice quiet but steady. "They see you as a means to power." Gerald gave a bitter chuckle. "I know. And perhaps that's my fault. I've given them the tools, and in doing so, I've given them temptation." He turned toward Shadow, his eyes weary but determined. "That's why you must stay true, Shadow. You must never let them use you for their own ends. You were not born to be their weapon. You were born for something greater." The words struck Shadow deeply, though he could not yet define what greater meant. He carried Maria's promise in his heart, but he also carried the whispers of something darker, something that spoke of destiny not chosen, but imposed. That night, in the quiet hum of the Ark's endless cycle, the whispers returned. Shadow stood alone in the observation deck, Earth glowing softly below. His reflection stared back at him, distorted by the glass, and within it, he heard the voice again. "Do not listen to the human." Black Doom's voice rumbled, deep and cold. "His dreams are fleeting. His flesh is weak. You are ours, Shadow. You were made for more than their fragile hopes. You were made for conquest." Shadow's fists clenched, the air around him crackling faintly with chaos energy. "I am not yours," he growled under his breath. A low chuckle echoed in his mind. "You are mine in blood. The cannon is not his creation. It is mine. When the time comes, you will awaken its true purpose, and you will lead us." The voice faded, leaving Shadow trembling, not with fear, but with a storm of conflict. He had sworn to Maria that he would protect humanity, but the whispers of his origin clawed at the edges of his thoughts. Could he deny the truth written into his very existence? The next morning, Maria noticed the change in him. She found him in the garden, staring not at the stars, but at the ground, as though searching for answers in the soil. "You're quiet today," she said softly, lowering herself beside him. "Is something wrong?" Shadow hesitated, then shook his head. "Just thinking." Maria tilted her head, her golden hair catching the artificial sunlight. "About the Earth?" "Yes," Shadow replied. But it was not the whole truth. He was thinking of Earth, yes, but also of the comet that loomed somewhere in the dark, drawing closer with every silent second. Mariah reached for his hand. "Whatever it is, I hope you know you don't have to carry it alone. You're not just some project, Shadow. You're part of my family. That means something." Her words softened the weight pressing against him, if only for a moment. He turned his hand, gently clasping hers in return. For Maria, he could resist. For her, he could silence the whispers. But the black arms were patient. The pact was not broken, only hidden. And as the Eclipse Cannon rose toward completion, so too did the shadow of their influence. The Eclipse Cannon neared completion. Its colossal barrel extended outward into the void like a sword raised toward the heavens. Every rivet, every circuit, every ounce of steel seemed to hum with a power that transcended mere human invention. From the outside, it was awe-inspiring. From within, it felt oppressive, casting long shadows across the Ark's halls. Gerald spent endless hours in its core chamber, hunched over consoles as data scrolled in endless streams. His colleagues marveled at his genius, but to Gerald there was no pride, only desperation. Each night, he returned to Maria's bedside and saw her body weakening, her breath shorter, her smile thinner. Time was slipping through his fingers, and the cannon, in all its magnitude, was not yet ready. To him, it wasn't a weapon. It was salvation. With chaos energy amplified through its colossal structure, he believed he could break through the limits of human biology, create a surge of power strong enough to erase Maria's illness forever. He told himself the weapon was simply a means to an end, that the deathly glow of destruction it promised was not its true purpose. But in his heart, he knew the truth. The cannon had been shaped by whispers, not entirely his own. There were equations in its framework that he hadn't invented, but remembered, as though whispered to him in dreams. And at the core of those whispers was a promise. Build this, and your wish shall be granted. Shadow felt it too. Whenever he stepped into the cannon's chamber, the air seemed heavier. His chest would tighten, his blood would hum, and the whispers of black doom would grow louder. The cannon was calling to him, resonating with the chaos energy in his body, with the alien DNA woven to his existence. One evening, Gerald invited Shadow into the chamber. The old man's hands shook as he placed them on the rail, staring up at the massive barrel overhead. "Do you see it, Shadow?" Gerald asked, his voice trembling not with fear, but with fervor. "This is humanity's future. With this, no disease, no disaster, no war can take us unprepared again. We will control chaos itself." Shadow's eyes narrowed. "Or destroy ourselves with it." Gerald turned sharply, his gaze piercing. "Do not speak of destruction. I have not given my life to death. This..." He gestured at the cannon, at the titanic machine humming with restrained power. "This will save Maria. It will save us all." Shadow's lips pressed into a thin line. He respected Gerald. He cared for Maria, but deep within, he knew the cannon was more than Gerald believed. He could feel the black arms pulsing within it, waiting, feeding. That night, the voice came again, clearer than ever. "You cannot deny it, Shadow. The cannon is our design. Your creator only built what we showed him. When the time comes, you will unleash it in our name." Shadow stood alone in the observation deck, his hands clenched so tightly that faint arcs of energy sparked from his gloves. "I am not your servant," he hissed. The voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You cannot escape what you are." The earth rotated silently beneath him, bathed in blue and green light. For Maria's sake, Shadow wanted to believe he could resist. But for the first time, doubt gnawed at him. Could a promise to one fragile human outweigh the blood of an entire alien race flowing through his veins? Meanwhile, tensions aboard the Ark escalated. The military demanded greater access to Shadow. They wanted tests, combat scenarios, energy releases, demonstrations of his potential alongside the cannon. Gerald resisted fiercely, shielding Shadow wherever he could. But his defiance came at a cost. Officers grew more suspicious. Branson, the commander who had once smirked at Gerald's protests, returned with sharper words. "You're hiding something," Branson said, his voice low, cold. "You built a weapon, that could end wars in seconds, yet you speak of peace. You've created a life form capable of shattering armies, yet you treat him like a child. Tell me, Professor, who are you really working for? Humanity or yourself? Gerald's heart pounded. He wanted to shout, to tell the man that this was about Maria, about saving her fragile life. But to speak her name in this room, in front of this predator, would be to put her in danger. So he held his tongue, glaring silently as Branson's smirk widened. "Mark my words," Branson added, stepping close enough for Gerald to smell the sharp scent of steel on his uniform. "If you won't use your creations for humanity's gain, someone else will. And when that day comes, your shadow won't be yours to protect." When Branson left, Gerald slumped into his chair, his hands covering his face. His dream of salvation was slipping away, hijacked by those who saw only power. Maria sensed the weight crushing her grandfather, though he tried to hide it. She spoke with Shadow in hushed tones, her voice frail but resolute. "They don't understand him," she whispered, looking into Shadow's crimson eyes. "They'll never see you the way I do. To them, you're a weapon. To me, you're hope." Shadow said nothing, but inside her words steadied him. As long as Maria believed in him, he could resist the whispers. He could fight the path laid before him. But the Black Arms were patient. Black Doom did not rage or demand. He simply waited. He knew the comet was drawing closer. He knew the Eclipse Cannon was nearing readiness. And he knew that when the moment came, Shadow's blood would respond, whether willingly or not. The hidden pact was almost complete. Gerald thought he had bargained only for knowledge. He thought he had outwitted the alien who had whispered in his dreams. But bargains with the Black Arms were never so simple. The cost of Gerald's genius would not be measured in equations or steel. It would be measured in lives. And in the silence of the Ark, with the cannon looming overhead and Maria's laughter growing softer by the day, Shadow felt the threads of fate pulling tighter. He was caught between two worlds, the fragile love of a human girl and the inexorable call of an alien legacy. The Eclipse Cannon was more than a machine. It was a crossroads, and soon its true purpose would be revealed. For decades, the skies above Earth had remained unchanged, stars glittering silently in the void, the pale blue planet spinning in its endless rhythm. The Ark drifted peacefully in orbit, its golden panels catching sunlight like the wings of some celestial guardian. But one night, the stars moved. At first, it was just a shadow, a distant smudge against the glittering canvas of space. Astronomers aboard the Ark squinted at their instruments, assuming it was debris or a cluster of rock drifting through the solar system. But then the readings came back. The object wasn't drifting, it was approaching. And it wasn't a cluster of rock, it was alive. The Black Comet. It emerged from the darkness like a wound in the universe, a monstrous mass of twisted rock and pulsing flesh. Its surface writhed with veins of crimson light, and its movement was unnatural, neither falling like a meteor nor drifting like a moon, but gliding, guided, purposeful. The closer it came, the more its immense shape blocked the stars, swallowing constellations whole. The first to sense it wasn't Gerald or the soldiers or even the scientists. It was Shadow. He stood alone at the Ark's observation deck, his crimson eyes locked on the growing shadow in the sky. He didn't need instruments to tell him what it was. He knew. His blood knew. The whispers that had haunted him all his life grew deafening, a chorus of voices rising in unison. We are here. The words pressed against his skull, vibrating through his chest, like a second heartbeat that wasn't his own. His fists clenched, his teeth ground together. He wanted to scream against it, to deny it, but no sound escaped his throat. Maria found him there, her delicate frame wrapped in a blanket as she walked slowly into the room. She followed his gaze and gasped softly when her eyes fell on the comet. It's beautiful, she whispered, her voice trembling with awe, like a star falling toward us. But Shadow's jaw tightened. It's not a star. It's a predator. Maria looked at him, confusion etched on her fragile features. Shadow did not elaborate. How could he tell her that the very thing glowing in the heavens was not only coming for Earth, but also for him? By morning, the Ark was in chaos. Alarm klaxons blared through the station as readings confirmed the comet's trajectory. Its path was no accident. It was moving directly toward Earth, drawn like a hunter stalking prey. Scientists scrambled through corridors, soldiers armed themselves, and officers shouted orders. Commander Branson stormed into Gerald's lab, his face flushed with grim satisfaction. "You knew," Branson accused, slamming a hand down on the console. "All this time, with your projects and your weapon, you knew something like this was coming." Gerald snapped back, his voice trembling with fury. "I knew humanity would one day face threats beyond its comprehension. That's why I built the Eclipse Cannon. Not for war, but for this. To protect Earth from what's coming." Branson leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Then prove it. Fire the cannon. Destroy the comet." But Gerald froze. To use the cannon was to unleash chaos energy on a scale he hadn't yet tested. If it failed, the backlash could obliterate the Ark. And if it succeeded... His gaze flickered to Shadow, stood silently in the corner, his crimson eyes unblinking. Gerald's stomach turned. The cannon alone wasn't enough. It needed Shadow, his blood, his power. And Gerald knew. So did the comet. As the Black Comet drew nearer, its grotesque details came into horrifying focus. Towers of bone jutted from its surface, spires that pulsed with dim red light like beating hearts. Shadows shifted across it, not tricks of light, but movement. Creatures, dark and twisted, swarmed its surface, clinging like parasites waiting to descend. The first strike came swiftly. From the comet's surface, streaks of crimson fire shot forth, tearing across the void and slamming into Earth's upper atmosphere. Cities below looked up to skies that bled red, explosions echoing like distant thunder. In moments, Earth's defenses scrambled, but against the comet's fury, their weapons were gnats against the storm. On the Ark, Maria clutched Shadow's arm, her eyes wide with terror. "They're attacking Earth. They're really attacking." Shadow's gaze hardened. For years, he had carried whispers of this moment in his mind, shadows of war written into his very blood. Now the nightmare had become reality. And deep within him, Black Doom's voice rose above the chaos, clear and commanding. "Come to me, Shadow. The time has come. Fulfill the pact. Lead my army, and the Earth shall be ours." Shadow staggered, his hand clutching his chest as though the voice itself burned him. Maria turned to him, her voice frantic. "Shadow, what is it? What's happening to you?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of the comet, not fear of death, but fear of himself. The Black Comet loomed closer with every passing hour until it filled the skies like a second, twisted moon. Its grotesque mass rotated slowly, and with each turn, new fissures opened, belching streams of crimson vapor that burned away the surrounding stars. For the people of Earth below, it was as though the heavens themselves had split open to reveal a nightmare. The governments of the world scrambled to respond. Fleets of aircraft rose into the skies, their wings slicing through the crimson haze. Satellites locked onto the comet, launching wave after wave of missiles. To the human eye, it looked like a desperate defense, a storm of light flaring against the darkness. But from the comet's surface, the alien horde answered in kind. The black arms descended. They came in swarms like insects poured from an upturned nest. Sleek, black forms streaked through the air, their eyes glowing like burning embers. Wings of shadow unfurled as they dove, tearing through jets, shredding their engines, scattering wreckage across the skies. For every missile that found its mark, a dozen more creatures replaced the fallen. The world was at war, though it hardly looked like war at all. It was slaughter. On the Ark, panic spiraled out of control. Commanders barked orders, soldiers manned stations, but the truth hung in the air like smoke. They weren't ready. They had never been ready. Gerald gripped the railing of the command deck, his face pale, his heart racing with guilt. He had seen this coming, but he had underestimated the scale. This wasn't an invasion. It was consumption. "Professor," Branson shouted, his voice hoarse. "The Eclipse Cannon. We can't hold them off without it." Gerald's hands trembled. His eyes darted to Shadow. The ultimate life form stood silently at the edge of the deck, staring into the void where the comet writhed. His face betrayed no fear, but his silence was its own kind of answer. "Shadow," Gerald said softly, almost pleading. "This is why you exist. This is why I made you. With your power, we can end this. Together, we can protect Earth." But even as the words left his mouth, another voice slid through Shadow's mind, cold and inescapable. "You were not made to protect them," Black Doom whispered, his tone coiling like smoke. "You were made to fulfill the Pact, to deliver me this world. Do not deny your true master." Shadow's fists clenched. His mind was a battlefield. The voices of Gerald and Black Doom clashed inside him, the pull of two fathers who had each tried to shape his destiny, one born of humanity, the other of alien blood. Maria reached for him, her small hand curling around his arm. "Shadow, you don't have to listen to anyone. Not him. Not even Grandfather. You're more than what they made you." For a moment, Shadow looked down at her, his crimson eyes softening. But then the Ark shuddered. A thunderous boom rattled through the station as an explosion tore across its outer hull. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. The comet's children had reached them. The black arms slammed against the Ark's defenses, their claws scraping against steel. Soldiers fired desperately, cutting down swarms of alien drones. But for every one that fell, two more forced their way through. Their screeches echoed through the metal corridors, high-pitched and guttural, enough to freeze the blood of hardened soldiers. Shadow moved. In a blur, he dashed through the corridors, chaos spears crackling in his palms. He tore through the first wave, ripping the creatures apart with blasts of energy that scorched the walls. For the first time, the aliens faltered, their glowing eyes dimming as his power cut them down. But they didn't retreat. Instead, they surged toward him, drawn by something deeper than instinct. They recognized him. Not as prey, not even as an enemy, but as kin. The realization churned Shadow's stomach. Every hiss, every shriek was directed at him. Not with hatred, but with a twisted, eager reverence. They weren't just attacking the Ark. They were trying to reclaim him. Enough! Shadow roared, unleashing a wave of chaos energy that vaporized a dozen creatures at once. His voice carried through the corridors like thunder, silencing even the gunfire for a heartbeat. I am not yours. I will never be yours. But the voices did not relent. Black Doom's laughter resonated inside his skull, deep and cruel. You cannot deny what you are, Shadow. You are mine. Your blood is mine. And soon, this world will be mine as well. The Ark's defenses began to collapse. Outer hulls buckled. Flames ripped through docking bays, and soldiers were dragged into the void. Maria was escorted to safety, but even within the reinforced labs, she clung to Shadow's presence. She knew that if he faltered, they would all be lost. Gerald, his heart pounding, finally gave the order. Prepare the Eclipse Cannon. The command rippled through the Ark. Generators roared to life, chaos energy surged through conduits, and the station began to tremble as the great cannon aligned with the approaching comet. The massive weapon glowed with a terrifying radiance, the culmination of Gerald's greatest creation. Yet Shadow remained still. His gaze stayed locked on the Black Comet as it drifted closer, its crimson glow bathing his black and red quills in a light that felt uncomfortably familiar. His heart pounded with the rhythm of two worlds colliding, the world he had sworn to protect, and the world that claimed him as its heir. The comet pulsed as though alive, as though aware of the weapon now aimed at it. And in the silence before the storm, Shadow heard Black Doom's voice once more. Choose, Shadow. Stand with me, and you will rule. Stand against me, and you will be destroyed with them. The fate of Earth teetered in the balance, and Shadow stood at the very heart of it, caught between the blood that created him and the choice that would define him. The Ark groaned under the weight of its purpose, as though the station itself felt the burden of what was about to be unleashed. Power surged through its veins, energy crackling across conduits, lighting panels flaring with white-hot intensity. The Eclipse Cannon, the weapon Gerald had poured his soul into, was now alive, its colossal barrel glowing with the condensed fury of chaos energy. On Earth, billions looked to the skies. Some prayed, some screamed, others stood frozen in silence. The comet loomed so close now that its jagged surface was visible even without telescopes, a mountain of flesh and stone that seemed almost close enough to touch. It blocked out the stars, eclipsed the moon, painted the night in crimson. Humanity held its breath. And at the center of it all stood Shadow. He could feel it, the pulse of the comet, beating in rhythm with his own heart. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were commands, demands. They surged inside him, pressing against his mind until it felt like his skull would crack. Every instinct screamed to give in, to surrender, to take his rightful place at the side of Black Doom. You are ours, the voice thundered. Born of my blood, shaped by my will, you cannot escape what you are. Shadow staggered, gripping the railing of the command deck. For a fleeting second, the world blurred. He saw himself not standing beside Gerald, not protecting Maria, but standing at the forefront of an army of black arms, leading them across Earth like a conquering king. The vision was intoxicating. Power without limit. Dominion without question. But then another memory pierced through the haze. Maria's smile. Her laugh echoing in the sterile halls of the Ark. The way she had whispered to him again and again that he wasn't a weapon, that he wasn't just an experiment. He was her friend. The comet roared, spewing more fire into Earth's skies. Gerald shouted orders. Branson barked at soldiers, but Shadow heard none of it. His choice was clawing at him, splitting him in two. The Eclipse Cannon locked onto its target. The station trembled violently as its energy output neared critical levels. One miscalculation, one error in timing, and the arc itself could be reduced to cinders. "Shadow!" Gerald shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. "You must channel your power into the cannon. Without you, it will fail." The words cut deep. Shadow turned toward him slowly, his eyes burning with the conflict. Gerald didn't know, he couldn't know, that Shadow's very blood sang in harmony with the enemy they were trying to destroy. To fire the cannon meant to choose humanity. To betray his creator's debt meant siding with his alien bloodline. Maria's voice trembled behind him. "Shadow, please, save them." That was enough. Shadow thrust his hand forward, his quills sparking with raw chaos energy. Power surged into the Eclipse Cannon, its glow intensifying until it was blinding. The weapon screamed with light, a ray of devastation tearing across the void, slamming into the Black Comet with a catastrophic force. The explosion was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. A sun ignited in orbit, a blinding inferno that shattered the night. The comet's surface erupted. Chunks of stone and bone torn free, vaporized into ash. The shockwave rippled across the planet, rattling windows, shaking mountains, sending oceans surging against their shores. For a moment, the people of Earth rejoiced. The invincible weapon had struck. The alien threat had been stopped. By the cheer died quickly. As the smoke cleared, the comet remained. Damaged, yes, scarred and burning, but alive. The monstrous mass pulsed with renewed fury, its crimson veins glowing brighter than ever. Where chunks had been torn away, the comet seemed to regenerate, threads of living tissue weaving themselves back together. And from its heart came the voice. "Did you truly believe you could destroy me, Shadow? I am eternal. You are mine." The black arms surged once more, descending in greater numbers, their wings blotting out the stars. The Ark was swarmed, soldiers torn apart in the corridors, defenses ripped to shreds. Earth below burned in crimson fire, cities collapsing under the endless assault. The Eclipse Cannon had not ended the war. It had only awakened the comet's wrath. Shadow fell to one knee, his body trembling from the energy he had poured into the cannon. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. But still, he pushed himself up, his eyes locked on the burning mass outside. He wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. Maria's voice cracked as she cried out, "Shadow, please, don't give up." But Black Doom's whisper coiled tighter around his mind. Why fight for them? Look how fragile they are. Their weapons fail. Their cities crumble. Their soldiers fall like insects. Stand with me, and all of this will be yours. Power, eternity, destiny. Shadow's body shook violently. His claws dug into the steel floor, sparks of chaos energy erupting around him. He wanted to scream, to tear the voice from his skull, to silence it forever. Then clarity struck him. Maria's face, her voice, her wish. The one thing she had ever truly asked of him. To protect the people of Earth, not for vengeance, not for conquest. Simply because it was right. Shadow rose, his eyes burning with renewed fire. He clenched his fists, chaos energy swirling like a storm around him. "I am not your servant," he growled. His voice shook the command deck, carrying through the chaos like a battle cry. "I am not your weapon, and I will never be your son." With that, he launched himself from the Ark, a streak of black and crimson cutting through space. The black arms swarmed toward him, but he tore through them with blinding speed, chaos spears piercing their bodies, scattering them like dust. He carved a path straight toward the comet itself, his power blazing brighter than the stars. The soldiers on the Ark watched in stunned silence as Shadow became a one-man army, a dark meteor streaking across the void. For the first time since the comet had appeared, hope sparked. Gerald whispered, almost to himself. He's defying his own creation. The comet responded with fury. Its surface split open, and from its heart emerged a colossal figure. Black Doom himself, vast and terrible, his form shifting like living shadow, his eyes burning with malevolent crimson fire. "Foolish child," Doom's voice thundered across the void. "If you will not stand with me, then you will die with them." Shadow didn't flinch. Energy roared around him, crackling with unstoppable force. "The world may be flawed," he said, his voice cold as steel. "But it's worth fighting for, and I'll tear you apart before I let you have it." The battle was only beginning. The Comet's armies swarmed like a living tide. Earth burned beneath their shadow, and the Eclipse Cannon trembled on the edge of collapse. But as Shadow charged headlong into the heart of the darkness, one truth shone brighter than the crimson sky. He had chosen his side, and he would fight to the very end. Chapter 5. The Shadow War, Part 1. The first strike of the Eclipse Cannon had scarred the comet, but it had not stopped it. What should have been a victory for Earth turned instead into the beginning of its darkest war. The Black Comet's wounds only seemed to enrage it further, its crimson veins pulsing brighter as the black arms poured out in endless waves. The first strike of the Eclipse Cannon had scarred the comet, but it had not stopped it. What should have been a victory for Earth turned instead into the beginning of its darkest war. The Black Comet's wounds only seemed to enrage it further, its crimson veins pulsing brighter as the black arms poured out in endless waves. The skies of Earth were no longer blue. They were painted in shades of fire and shadow, filled with the shrieks of alien creatures and the roar of human weapons. Cities that once bustled with life became war zones. Skyscrapers crumbled beneath the weight of creatures that clung to their sides like spiders, while streets flooded with panicked civilians fleeing in every direction. In the chaos, humanity fought back. G.U.N mobilized its entire force, deploying tanks, aircraft, and squads of soldiers across the globe. Their rifles rattled against the alien hordes, tracer fire cutting through the crimson skies. For every soldier who fell, another stepped forward, fueled not by certainty of victory, but by the refusal to surrender their home. Yet it wasn't enough. The black arms moved like shadows given form, their bodies shrugging off bullets, their claws slicing through armor. Wherever they landed, despair followed. Humanity had weapons, but the black arms had something greater, an unbreakable link to their leader. Every creature moved with the same will, every strike coordinated by Black Doom's mind. It wasn't just an army, it was a single, monstrous organism. And in the middle of it all was Shadow. He had hurled himself into the battlefield not as a soldier, not even as a weapon, but as something the world had never seen before. A single warrior who fought with the force of an army. He tore through swarms of black arms with chaos spears that lit the sky like lightning, shattered armored beasts with chaos blasts that rippled across city blocks. To the humans below, he was a phantom of hope, streaking across the crimson clouds like a dark guardian. But to the Black Arms, he was their commander. Rebellious, yes, but still bound to them by blood. Wherever he appeared, their focus shifted. Their movements changed. Their voices echoed louder in his mind. Each battle and assault, not just on his body, but on his will. Return to us. You are ours. This is your war, your inheritance. Each time he silenced them with violence. But still the whispers clawed at him, weakening his resolve. On the ground, Sonic and his allies joined the fray. Sonic dashed through the burning streets, his speed slicing through swarms of alien drones, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Tails soared overhead in the tornado, unleashing a barrage of missiles, while Knuckles stood like a living fortress, smashing through beasts that dwarfed even him. Amy fought alongside soldiers, her hammer cracking through armored skulls with brutal efficiency. For once, the heroes of Earth and Gun fought as one, but even together, they were barely holding the line. Amid the chaos, Sonic caught a glimpse of Shadow streaking overhead, his aura blazing with crimson fire. For a moment, Sonic paused, his eyes narrowing. Shadow wasn't fighting like an ally. He wasn't fighting like a friend. He was fighting like someone at war with himself. When Shadow landed in the ruins of a shattered city block, Sonic was there waiting. Dust swirled around them as alien corpses smoldered in the streets. "Shadow!" Sonic shouted over the chaos. "We got enough problems without you burning yourself out. You can't take them all on alone." Shadow turned his head slowly, his crimson eyes glowing faintly in the smoke. His voice was low, heavy. "You don't understand, Sonic. They're not just enemies. They're part of me. And if I can't stop them, no one can." Before Sonic could answer, the ground split open, and a massive Black Arms beast erupted from below, its maw wide enough to swallow a tank. Shadow didn't hesitate. He vanished in a flash of chaos control, reappearing above the monster's skull, driving a chaos spear straight through its brain. The beast collapsed in a heap, his body dissolving into ash. Sonic shielded his eyes from the blast, then looked up at Shadow again. "Then stop holding back. Because right now, we all need you." Shadow didn't respond. He turned his gaze skyward where the comet still loomed, its glow unbroken, despite the destruction it had endured. His silence was enough of an answer. The war pressed on. Across oceans, navies battled alien leviathans rising from the deep. In deserts, soldiers faced swarms that blotted out the sun. Forests burned, mountains split, cities fell. And everywhere, Shadow moved like a phantom, a streak of light and darkness carving through the tide. But no matter how many enemies he destroyed, he couldn't escape the truth. This war was not just against an invading army. It was against himself, against the blood that tied him to the very creatures he fought. And as the Black Comet pulsed brighter in the skies above, Shadow knew the war was only just beginning. The world burned. Across continents, alien shadows stretched like a plague, consuming forests, cities, oceans, and skies. Humanity resistance was scattered and desperate, yet their defiance refused to die. Tanks rolled across shattered highways, aircraft screamed through the crimson haze, and soldiers fought street by street with rifles glowing red from the heat of endless fire. But for every victory, 100 defeats followed. The Black Arms seemed endless, pouring from the comet like a swarm without end. Their claws ripped through armor, their screeches broke the night, and their wings blotted out the stars. In the middle of this storm, Shadow fought like a demon unleashed. His movements blurred into streaks of light, his chaos energy flaring with every strike. He cut down swarms of drones with fluid precision, obliterated massive beasts with chaos blasts that rattled buildings to their foundations. To the soldiers watching from the ground, Shadow was more than a warrior. He was a myth come to life, a phantom who arrived in fire and vanished in smoke, always where the fight was worst. And yet, the whispers did not stop. Every battle, every victory, every surge of power, Black Doom's voice grew louder. "Why resist? You are wasting yourself for insects who cower and flee. This planet is not yours to defend, it is ours to claim." The voice echoed through Shadow's mind until it was nearly unbearable. Even when he stood among allies, Sonic racing at his side, Knuckles breaking enemies apart with raw strength, Amy rallying troops with her fierce determination. The whispers never left him. And the more he fought, the clearer one truth became. Black Doom didn't just want to conquer Earth. He wanted Shadow himself. In the skies above, Tails piloted the tornado through waves of alien flyers, his young face hardened with grim resolve. His hands never stopped moving across the controls, launching missile after missile, cutting through swarm after swarm. Through his headset, he spoke to Sonic and Shadow below. The Comet's energy readings are spiking again. Whatever it's doing, it's preparing for something bigger. If we don't stop it soon, Earth's not going to survive the next wave. Shadow glanced skyward. His crimson eyes narrowed. He could feel it too. The comet wasn't just spawning more soldiers. It was feeding, growing stronger. Its heartbeat was the same as his own, pounding louder with every moment. "We'll cut it down," Shadow said flatly. "No matter what it takes." Sonic skidded to a halt beside him, panting after tearing through a cluster of drones. He looked at Shadow with narrowed eyes. "You keep saying that, but you're not acting like we're in this together. You're fighting like this is your war." Shadow turned, his expression unreadable. "Because it is." Before Sonic could respond, the ground split beneath their feet, and a monstrous roar split the air. A Black Arms war beast surged upward, towering above the ruins of the city. Its body was armored in bone, its arms as thick as buildings, its eyes burning with crimson fire. The soldiers scattered, unleashing a hail of gunfire that barely scratched its hide. Sonic charged forward without hesitation, his body spinning into a homing attack that struck the beast's chest with a resounding crack. The monster barely staggered. "Great," Sonic muttered, bouncing back into position. "Looks like it's your turn, Shadow." Shadow stepped forward, chaos energy radiating from his form. With a burst of speed, he launched himself into the air, a crimson streak against the burning sky. The beast swung its colossal arm, but Shadow warped in a flash of chaos control, reappearing above its skull. He drove a chaos spear deep into its eye, a blinding explosion of light splitting the air. The monster reeled, howling in agony, but still it fought. Its other arm swung down, smashing into the streets, sending shockwaves through the city. Sonic raced across falling rubble, drawing the beast's attention, while Shadow gathered energy for one final strike. The whispers surged again. "You see? You could control this. With me, such creatures would bow to your will. Why destroy what you could command?" Shadow grit his teeth, his fury burning hotter than his pain. "I don't need your army." With that, he unleashed a chaos blast that engulfed the beast's head in a crimson sphere of destruction. The explosion tore it apart, bone and sinew disintegrating in the fire. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but ash drifting in the crimson wind. The soldiers erupted in cheers. For a moment, amidst the fire and ruin, hope sparked again. But that hope was short-lived. High above, the Black Comet split open. The surface cracked like a wound, revealing a swirling core of pulsating flesh and crimson light. The sight was enough to silence even the bravest soldiers. And from that core, a wave of energy rippled outward, sweeping across the earth. Entire cities were flattened by the shockwave. Skies turned darker. Oceans boiled at their edges. It wasn't just destruction. It was dominance. The comet imposing its will on the planet itself. Shadow fell to one knee, clutching his chest. The energy burned through him, as if the comet were pulling at its very soul. He could hear Black Doom's voice now, not as a whisper, but as a command, every word booming like thunder inside his skull. "Come to me, Shadow. The war is already won. You belong at my side. End this struggle and claim your destiny." Shadow staggered, his breath heavy, his vision blurring. For the first time, Sonic reached out, grabbing his shoulder. Hey, stay with me. Don't listen to him. You're stronger than that. Shadow lifted his gaze. His eyes glowed brighter than before, filled with conflict, but also fire. Stronger because I refuse him. Sonic smirked, even in the chaos. Now that's just the Shadow I know. Let's show this overgrown rock what happens when it messes with our world. The two hedgehogs turned toward the burning sky, their rivalry forgotten, their fates entwined in this one desperate stand. The war wasn't over, not yet. And Shadow knew the hardest part was still to come. The skies bled red. Cities lay in ruin, their lights extinguished under a shroud of alien fire. Humanity, once proud and untouchable, fought from the shadows of its broken towers. The black arms had dragged the world into a nightmare, and the comet above loomed larger with every passing day. And yet resistance had not broken. Across the world, scattered pockets of soldiers, freedom fighters, and even ordinary civilians refused to surrender. They had seen Shadow fight, seen Sonic charge into battle, seen Knuckles and Rouge tearing into enemies who dwarfed them in size. The sight of such heroes ignited something that no alien invasion could erase: hope. But hope alone would not win this war. The United Federation's command room buzzed with frantic energy, screens filled with red markers showing territories consumed by the invaders. President towers of smoke rose in the background of every broadcast. Scientists shouted calculations about energy surges, while generals barked orders into radios that only half worked. At the center of the chaos, Commander Towers, the man who had overseen G.U.N's war efforts for decades, stood with his jaw clenched, eyes hard. His voice cut through the noise like steel. Every analysis points to the comet itself being the source. As long as it hangs above us, the Black Arms will not stop. Destroy the comet, and we cut off their strength at the root. His words were followed by silence. The room was filled with men and women who had watched their weapons fail, their defenses shatter. And yet, there was no other path forward. Towers turned to the screen, showing Shadow's crimson eyes staring back at him. This fight was always about you, wasn't it? If Earth is going to survive, we'll need you at the front. Shadow didn't respond with the words. He simply nodded, the gesture heavy with the weight of inevitability. On the battlefield below, Sonic kicked aside the remains of a drone and stretched his arms. So let me get this straight. We're supposed to blow up a comet the size of a continent? Tails' voice came through the comm, filled with urgency. Not blow it up, pierce it. The Eclipse Cannon still exists. If we can reactivate it, we might have one shot powerful enough to rip straight through the comet's core. Rouge, hovering nearby, with her wings beating against the smoke, smirked faintly. Sounds easy enough. Just break into one of the most secure facilities in orbit, restart a weapon of mass destruction, and aim it at an alien god. Piece of cake. Sonic grinned. Glad you're still optimistic. Shadow, silent until now, turned his gaze upward. The comet pulsed with a glow that matched his heartbeat. He could feel Black Doom's presence, closer than ever, clawing at his mind. Pierce the comet, and you'll pierce me as well. The thought lingered. If the Eclipse Cannon was fired, the comet would be destroyed. But so too might be the connection that bound Shadow's very existence. Was this the cost? To save Earth by sacrificing himself? He didn't say the words out loud, but the decision began to form in his heart. The battle intensified as the heroes pushed their way toward the comet's nearest descent point, where its tendrils had rooted into Earth's surface like claws. The alien structures pulse with grotesque energy, towers of flesh and metal fusing into the planet's soil. Out of them poured legions of Black Arms warriors, determined to crush anyone daring to strike back. Sonic tore through them like lightning, his spin attacks ripping apart enemy lines. Knuckles punched straight through armored beasts, each strike cracking the ground beneath his feet. Amy, wielding her hammer, knocked enemies aside with fearless determination, refusing to let despair reach the troops around her. Shadow fought at the front, his chaos energy blazing like a star. Every time his power flared, soldiers rallied. Every time his strikes landed, they believed Earth could still be saved. But the whispers grew unbearable. Why fight for them? They will never accept you. You are not one of them. You were created to rule, not to serve. End this charade and take your rightful place at my side. Shadow staggered for a brief moment, clutching his head. The voice was no longer distant. It was everywhere, woven into the fabric of his thoughts. He could feel Black Doom not just speaking, but pulling, dragging him toward the comet. Sonic noticed, skidding to a halt beside him. Shadow, don't let him in. You're stronger than he is. Shadow gritted his teeth, forcing his body upright. This isn't about strength. It's about choice. And in that moment, he made one. The heroes reached the descent point, where the comet's tendrils cracked the Earth itself. Standing before them was no ordinary commander. It was one of Black Doom's generals, a towering monstrosity whose form constantly shifted between solid and liquid, its body glowing with the same crimson energy as the comet. It spoke in a voice like grinding stone. You will not reach the heart. The Master awaits only Shadow, and he does not require the rest of you. The general raised its arms, unleashing a wave of energy that sent the ground shattering. Soldiers screamed as the shock wave knocked them back. But Sonic and Shadow didn't hesitate. They charged forward side by side. The battle was chaos. The general's attacks were relentless, its body shifting into blades, whips, and spears, each strike nearly impossible to predict. Sonic darted in and out, landing quick hits and retreating. Shadow, however, didn't hold back. His chaos energy carved through the monster, each strike fueled not by rage, but by resolve. As the battle reached its peak, Shadow unleashed a chaos spear directly into the general's core. The creature screamed, its body convulsing before collapsing into ash. The path forward was open, but the victory was hollow. As the dust cleared, Black Doom's voice thundered across the battlefield. Not just in Shadow's mind, but in the minds of every living creature on Earth. You cannot stop what has already begun. This world will fall, its people consumed, its skies burned. And Shadow, when the end comes, you will return to me. The soldiers shivered at the sound, their weapons trembling in their hands. Even Sonic's usual confidence faltered for a moment. But Shadow stepped forward, his expression calm, his eyes burning with crimson fire. No, he said simply. I'll end this. Not for you, not for them. For the choice I make with my own will. He turned to the others. The cannon is our only chance. Get me to it. The team exchanged glances. They knew what he wasn't saying, that this mission could cost Shadow everything. But none of them argued. Not anymore. As the heroes and soldiers prepared for the assault on the Black Comet itself, the Shadow War reached its turning point. The invasion had not been stopped, but humanity had not fallen. Cities lay in ruin, the skies were burning, and the earth trembled beneath the comet's shadow. But the people fought on. And with Shadow at their side, their courage became unshakable. For the first time since the war began, Black Doom had not claimed a victory. He had been resisted, denied. And though the battle ahead promised greater horrors, one truth rang clear across the world. The Shadow War was not yet lost. and Shadow the Hedgehog was ready to decide its end. Chapter 6. Fall of Black Doom, Part 1. The Earth shuddered as the comet's shadow stretched across the globe. Oceans churned, forests wilted, and the sky itself seemed ready to collapse under the weight of the alien Leviathan that loomed above. The invasion had dragged the planet to its knees, but humanity's spirit still burned. And at the center of it all, standing amidst the smoldering ruins of a battlefield, the Earth shuddered as the comet's shadow stretched across the globe. Oceans churned, forests wilted, and the sky itself seemed ready to collapse under the weight of the alien Leviathan that loomed above. The invasion had dragged the planet to its knees, but humanity's spirit still burned. And at the center of it all, standing amidst the smoldering ruins of a battlefield, was Shadow. His gaze was fixed on the heavens where the Black Comet pulsed like a heart of crimson fire. Every beat of that pulse echoed in his own chest, as though the comet itself was alive inside him. He knew this was it. The war was no longer a scattered series of battles, no longer a desperate push for survival. This was the end game. Either the comet would fall, or Earth would. The plan was set. The Eclipse Cannon, the weapon once built to terrify nations, was their final hope. Buried in the depths of the Ark, forgotten but not destroyed, it was now the only force powerful enough to pierce the comet's core. Tails hunched over the schematics in the command ship, his young face drawn and weary but determined. If we can get close enough, the Eclipse Cannon should be able to fire directly into the comet's heart. But we'll need to reactivate its systems, bypass the security codes, and give it enough power to make the shot. That means getting to the Ark and keeping the Black Arms off us while we work. Rouge leaned against the console, her arms folded, her tone sharp. That's the hard part. Black Doom knows exactly what we're planning. He'll throw everything he has at the Ark to stop us. Knuckles cracked his fists, his voice steady but filled with heat. Then we punch our way through. Whatever he sends, we smash it. That's what we're here for. Sonic, always ready with a grin even in the darkest of moments, gave a nod towards Shadow. And something tells me he'll be sending his best to deal with you. All eyes turned to Shadow. His face betrayed nothing. But inside his mind, the whispers of Black Doom surged louder than ever. You are mine. You were born for this. Why fight the inevitable? But Shadow's reply was silence. His choice had already been made. The journey to the Ark was like flying into the mouth of a storm. Alien fleets swarmed in endless waves, their ships blotting out the stars. The Federation scrambled what little was left of its air force, desperate pilots throwing themselves into the fight to clear a path. The sky became a battlefield of fire and smoke, streaks of light and explosions filling the void. Amidst it all, the heroes fought their way forward, tails piloted with precision, weaving through swarms of enemy flyers. Rouge darted through the chaos, planting explosives to tear apart enemy strongholds. Knuckles tore open boarding parties with raw strength, while Sonic streaked across ships like a comet of blue fire, ripping through hulls and scattering foes. And Shadow was a weapon unto himself. Every chaos spear lit the battlefield in crimson. Every chaos blast ripped through swarms, leaving only silence in its wake. To the soldiers who caught the glimpses of him fighting among the stars, Shadow was less a hedgehog and more a force of nature. Yet with every strike he could feel it, the pull of the comet, the tightening grip of Black Doom's will. The closer they came, the louder the voice grew. You cannot destroy me, Shadow. You are me. Your power flows from the same blood that fuels this comet. Destroy it, and you destroy yourself. Shadow's hand tightened into a fist. Perhaps that was true. Perhaps his end was already written. But if his death was the price of Earth's survival, then so be it. At last, the Ark came into view, its massive frame floating in the void above Earth. Though scarred by years of abandonment, the space colony still carried its solemn beauty. Its golden rings glinted faintly in the distance, a relic of an age of ambition and tragedy. Sonic gazed at it with a low whistle. Been a while since we were up here. Feels like the past is coming back to bite us, huh? Rouge smirked faintly, though her eyes lingered on Shadow. Some wounds never stay buried. The heroes landed within the Ark's hangar, the air heavy with dust and silence. But silence did not last long. No sooner had their feet touched the steel floors than the walls trembled, and the corridors filled with the screeches of Black Arm's forces. "They're already here!" Tails shouted. Knuckles grinned, slamming his fists together. "Good. Saves us the trouble of finding them." The group charged forward, carving a path through the swarm. Every corner of the Ark became a battlefield, hallways filled with chaos fire, chambers echoing with roars and explosions. The deeper they pushed, the more Shadow felt the weight of the place pressing down on him. Memories of Maria, memories of Gerald, memories of his own creation. And through it all, Black Doom's laughter echoed in his mind. Yes, return to the place of your birth. Return to where your destiny was written. End this charade, and accept what you are. Shadow ignored the voice. He pressed forward, leading the way into the Eclipse Cannon chamber. The sight stole their breath. The cannon stretched across the chamber like a sleeping beast, its barrel aimed eternally into the void. Dust and neglect had dulled its shine, but the weapon still radiated a terrible majesty. It was the same cannon that had once threatened Earth's destruction, now poised to become its salvation. Tails immediately rushed to the controls, his fingers flying over the keys. "I can bring it online, but it's going to take time. I'll need at least 10 minutes. Sonic spun into position beside him. "Then you've got it. We'll keep you covered." The others formed a circle around the chamber, preparing for the storm they knew was coming. And come it did. The walls shattered as an army of Black Arm's warriors poured into the chamber, their screeches deafening. The room became a war zone in seconds, blades clashing, blasts of energy rattling the walls. Sonic blurred through the swarm. Knuckles tore them apart. Rouge struck with precision. Amy's hammer rang like thunder. And Shadow fought like fire incarnate, crimson light blazing brighter with each strike. But as the battle raged, the chamber shook again, this time not from soldiers, but from something greater. The air split open. Darkness poured into the room like a tide, and from that darkness, Black Doom himself emerged. The song the chamber went cold. Not the cold of vacuum or steel, but a deeper, suffocating chill that gnawed at the soul. The lights flickered, the air thickened, and shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. Then he emerged. Black Doom was no longer a whisper, no longer a looming presence hidden within the comet's glow. Here inside the Ark, he manifested in full. His body was a grotesque tapestry of alien flesh and energy, a form both regal and horrifying. His wings unfurled like curtains of darkness, blotting out the glow of the Eclipse Cannon. His eyes burned with cruel intelligence, and when he spoke, his voice filled every corner of the chamber. "Shadow, my son." The words struck harder than any blade. The battle froze for an instant. Soldiers and heroes alike stunned into silence. Sonic's quills bristled as he stood ready, his expression wary. Rouge narrowed her eyes, her grip tightening. Tails hesitated at the controls, glancing at Shadow. Shadow didn't move. He simply stared at the figure before him, crimson eyes locked onto Black Doom's. I am not your son, Shadow said at last, his voice quiet but sharp. Black Doom's smile widened, revealing fangs that glistened in the dim light. You cannot deny the truth of your blood. You were created with my essence, my gift. Every ounce of power you wield comes from me. You were never human, never one of them. You are mine. Shadow's fists clenched. Chaos energy pulsed faintly around him. I was created to protect this world. That is the only truth that matters. The alien lord's laughter shook the chamber, sending cracks across the steel walls. Protect them? These insects who fear you, who see you as nothing more than a weapon? They will never accept you. But with me, you could rule. Together, father and son, we could claim not just this world, but all worlds. The universe itself would bow before us. The temptation hung heavy in the air, thick as poison. Even the soldiers could feel the weight of the words. Some faltered, eyes wide, wondering if the hedgehog who had carried them this far would falter at the edge of destiny. Sonic broke the silence, his voice cutting sharp through the tension. Don't listen to him, Shadow. He's trying to make you forget who you are. Black Doom's gaze shifted, his smile fading as his tone hardened. And who is he, Hedgehog? A shadow of a man who is long dead? A failed experiment, born of desperation? A tool wielded by others until he breaks? His wings spread wider, filling the room with their presence. He is mine, and nothing you say will change that. The words sliced at Shadow's thoughts, threatening to crack the armor he had built around himself. Maria's voice, Gerald's hopes, the endless battles. Was he really just an echo of someone else's dream? For a moment, doubt clawed at him. Then he remembered the faces of those he had fought beside. Sonic's unrelenting drive, Rouge's sharp cunning, Knuckles' strength, Amy's courage, Tails' brilliance. The soldiers who had looked at him not with fear, but with belief. And Maria, her voice clear as starlight. Please, protect them. The doubt burned away. Shadow straightened, his energy flaring so bright, it illuminated the chamber. I am not your son. I am not your weapon. I am Shadow the Hedgehog, and I choose my own destiny. The room shook as chaos energy burst from him, crimson fire rippling across the battlefield. Black Doom's eyes narrowed. The smile returned, but now it was sharper, crueler. So be it. Then you will die as the traitor you are. With a roar, the alien lord unleashed his power. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, striking walls and soldiers alike. The chamber became a storm of shadow and flame. Sonic and the others leapt into the fray, but Black Doom's focus remained locked on Shadow. Father and creation, master and rebel. Their powers collided, and the chamber rattled with every strike. Shadow blurred through the battlefield, teleporting with chaos control to evade the sweeping lashes of Black Doom's claws. He struck with chaos spears, each one tearing chunks of flesh from the alien's form, but the wounds closed almost instantly, re-knitting in grotesque flashes of light. You cannot harm me, Black Doom snarled. I am eternal, and you... His hand lashed out, seizing Shadow by the throat, lifting him effortlessly from the ground. Are nothing without me. Shadow struggled, his energy sparking wildly. His vision blurred, his lungs burning. But even as darkness closed in, he forced his hand upward, pressing it against Black Doom's chest. Chaos! Blast! The explosion ripped the chamber apart. Soldiers and heroes were thrown back by the shockwave. For a moment, everything was fire and smoke. When the haze cleared, Black Doom stood, wounded but far from defeated. Shadow dropped to one knee, his breath ragged. And the alien lord laughed again. Pathetic. You wield my power, yet you cannot even control it. This is your end, Shadow. The chamber trembled as the comet itself seemed to answer his call, its crimson energy surging down into his body. Black Doom's form grew larger, more monstrous, his wings stretching wider until they seemed to scrape the ceiling. Sonic clenched his fists, his voice urgent. "Shadow! He's drawing from the comet itself! We've got to cut him off, now!" Tails shouted from the console, fingers flying. "The Eclipse Cannon's charging, but it needs more time! Hold him off!" Rouge darted past Shadow, hurling explosives at the alien lord, while Knuckles and Amy struck from opposite sides. Their attacks landed, but Black Doom swatted them away like flies. His focus never left Shadow. The hedgehog stood slowly, his body trembling, his energy flickering. A fusion of alien flesh and comet energy. His wings beat like thunder, sending shock waves through steel and stone. Every step he took rattled the ark itself, and every word he spoke threatened to drown the hearts of all who heard him. "Shadow, you cannot deny me. You are the key, the heir, the vessel of my will. This world cannot resist us. With your power at my side, the universe would bow." Shadow stood amidst the chaos, his chest heaving, his body shaking from the strain of containing his chaos energy. Around him, Sonic, Rouge, Knuckles, and the soldiers fought desperately just to hold the swarm at bay. But all of it, the war, the invasion, the fate of Earth, came down to this one confrontation. Shadow raised his head, his crimson eyes burning brighter than ever. His voice cut through the roar of battle. "I am no one's vessel. I am no one's heir. My destiny is mine alone." The declaration ignited something in the room. The soldiers rallied. Sonic grinned fiercely, and even Rouge allowed herself the faintest smirk. But Black Doom only grew angrier. "Then you will share this planet's fate. Both will fall together." He hurled a torrent of crimson energy, a wave of destruction that consumed everything in its path. Shadow warped in a flash of chaos control, reappearing above him. He drove a chaos spear deep into Black Doom's chest. The alien roared, staggering, but still did not fall. The battle became a blur. Shadow teleporting, striking, evading, each attack growing fiercer, each counterstrike heavier. The chamber shook with every collision of power. But Shadow could feel it. His body was reaching its limit. His energy burned like fire, threatening to consume him from the inside. Black Doom's words echoed in his mind, mingling with his own doubts. "Destroy the comet, and you destroy yourself." He knew it might be true, and yet the choice had already been made. "At the console," Tails shouted over the roar. "The Eclipse Cannon is almost ready. Just 30 more seconds." Sonic darted in, knocking back a wave of enemies before they could reach the young fox. "You heard him, Shadow. Just keep Doom busy a little longer." "Easier said than done," Knuckles growled, grappling with one of the larger beasts. Rouge's voice cut sharp. "He's not fighting to buy time. He's fighting to end this." Her words proved true. Shadow no longer fought defensively. Every strike was reckless, devastating, as though he had stopped caring about his own survival. He drove Black Doom backwards, step by step, toward the cannon itself. The alien lord bellowed, his wings tearing through the air. "Foolish creation. If I fall, you fall with me." Shadow's voice was calm, resolute. "Then so be it." With a final surge of energy, he unleashed a chaos blast that engulfed them both. The explosion lit the chamber like a miniature sun. Soldiers shielded their eyes. Sonic staggered back. Alarm screamed as the arc trembled. When the light faded, Shadow still stood. Barely. His chest rose and fell in ragged gasps, his body glowing with unstable energy. Black Doom, wounded but not destroyed, snarled with fury. "You cannot kill me. My life is bound to the comet. As long as it lives, so do I. Shadow's gaze shifted to the Eclipse Cannon, now glowing with power, its systems fully online. Tails' voice cracked with urgency. "It's ready! Shadow, we just need a target lock." The Hedgehog understood instantly. If the cannon fired into the comet, it would destroy Black Doom and his army in one strike. But it would also sever the very source of Shadow's existence. This was the choice Maria had asked of him all those years ago, to protect humanity, no matter the cost. Shadow closed his eyes. He heard her voice again, soft and clear. "For the people of this planet, give them a chance to be happy." When his eyes opened, they blazed brighter than ever. He raised his hand, locking the cannon's aim directly onto the comet's core. "Fire!" The Eclipse Cannon unleashed its fury. A beam of pure light erupted from the arc, lancing across the void and piercing the Black Comet. The heavens themselves seemed to scream as the beam tore through flesh and stone, splitting the alien Leviathan apart. The comet convulsed, crimson fire spilling from its cracks. Black Doom shrieked, his form unraveling in the blast. "No, you are mine. You are me." But Shadow's voice cut through the chaos one last time. "I am Shadow the Hedgehog, and I will protect this world." The comet exploded. The void filled with light, brighter than any sun. The shockwave rattled the arc, shook the planet, lit the night sky across the earth. People in ruined cities looked up, watching as the crimson star that had haunted them for so long finally shattered into dust. The invasion was over. Silence fell in the chamber. The swarm of black arms dissolved into ash, their connections severed with their master's fall. Soldiers lowered their weapons, staring in disbelief. Sonic collapsed onto the floor, laughing breathlessly. He actually did it." Tails' eyes were wide, his hands trembling over the console. "We're safe. Earth is safe." Rouge turned, scanning the chamber. Her smirk faded. "Where's Shadow?" At first, there was nothing. Just smoke, silence, and the faint hum of dying energy. Then, from the shadows, he stepped forward. His body was battered, his energy dim, but he still stood. Still alive. Sonic rose to his feet, a grin spreading across his face. "You never stop surprising me, do you?" Shadow said nothing. He simply walked past them, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the ark's window. Rouge's voice was soft, almost curious. "So, what now?" Shadow paused. His eyes narrowed as he looked out into the void where the comet had once loomed. "Now, I continue. Maria's wish is not yet finished." And with that, he vanished into the corridors, leaving only silence behind. The Black Comet had fallen. Black Doom was no more. Earth had been spared annihilation, its skies free of the crimson shadow that once threatened to consume it. But victory came not from weapons or armies, but from one choice. A choice made by a being who once questioned his very existence. Shadow the Hedgehog had faced his creator, his destiny, and his blood, and he had chosen something greater. He had chosen freedom. He had chosen to protect. And though his path remained uncertain, one truth echoed through history. When the stars themselves turned against the Earth, it was the ultimate life form who stood between destruction and survival. The Shadow War was over. But Shadow's journey had only just begun.